Hey, what's up, Heavy Metallurgy? It's Logan, the Metal and Beer Snob here. Picture this. The year is 2025, and there are hordes of death metal bands out there looking for fresh brains to consume. But you can only pick one to have dine upon you. Here's a suggestion. Why not try Morbific's Bloom of the Abnormal Flesh? Grab a beer and a fork, and let's get ready to digest some rotten death metal. And tonight, I'm lucky enough to be in full form. You see, it's a Friday, and I'm taking this chance to have a beer and talk about some death metal. So, cheers. Thanks for watching. Let's dive in. So, as I said, it is a packed house in 2025 when it comes to death metal. There's tons out there, and the real question is, what does Morbific have that separates themselves from the pack? Do they have what it takes to really be a standout in this overcrowded zombie-like genre? We shall see. First, though, here's a little history and kind of my personal interactions with the band. So this is actually my first album fully checking them out. I've definitely heard mention of them over the years, but for whatever reason, there were other death metal bands that I would listen to. So kind of was excited going into this and to have the opportunity to explore a new band which has really made a name for themselves these past couple of years. With that being said, I did listen to the earlier albums to prepare myself for this one, and am kind of excited to see how it fits into their extra grimy, extra down-tuned, swampy death metal. So now on to Morbific themselves. So these guys were exhumed in 2020 in Finland. And, man, they're just a down-tuned, knuckle-dragging, three-piece style death metal. I mean, they've already made quite a splash, I think, just with how bare bones the production is and how gnarly their riffs are. And really one reason why I think that they've exploded on the scene is because they've been quite prolific in the 5 years that they've been around. Right out the gate, they released 2 albums back-to-back. First in 2021 with Ominous Seep of Putridity, and then again in 2022 with Squirm Beyond the Mortal Realm. In addition to that, there's been a multitude of demos and splits interspersed between their releases. And now 3 years later, after Squirm Beyond the Mortal Realm, we're back with LP number 3, Bloom of Abnormal Flesh, which comes out April 21st digitally and is being released kind of at the same time on all 3 formats in 3 different places. We'll go and list them all. If you're a cassette head, go to Headsplit Records as they're releasing the cassette. If you prefer CD, Memento Mori is doing that. And then finally, Misako Un Hojo is handling the vinyl. So on Bloom of Abnormal Flesh, Morbific really do a good job of having a balanced sound between just straight up old school death metal revival, something a little bit newer, and then also some killer death doom sprinkled throughout. They're pulling from a couple different areas to come together to create this final product. Like, if I were to compare them to any bands that could scratch similar itches, some of the earlier and even later day Autopsy records, and then for a modern band, I actually think Undergang from Denmark fit this sound fairly well. But what Undergang did to the 2010 death metal scene, I think that's what Morbific is currently doing for the 2020 death metal scene. But at the same time, they're putting their own unique Finnish spin on it and making it even grimier than Undergang somehow. If you are an established Morbific fan going into this third album, though, you will notice some differences between Bloom of Abnormal Flesh and Squirm Beyond the Mortal Realm. The main one being the production. The production on Squirm is a choice, for sure. It's one that I definitely enjoyed and found very unique when exploring it, but it's pretty grimy, and the guitar tone itself is just so kind of overblown and distorted. It definitely adds to the uniqueness of the record, but then at the same time, I think it got in the way of some of the songwriting. So the biggest difference is that they cleaned up both the production and the guitar tone for Bloom. And now you can really hear what the guitar is doing, and you can make out the band a whole lot better. And instead of, the recording sounding like it's a little further away, it's very much up in your face as much as possible. And then I guess with this newfound production, I think they're exploring their songwriting a bit more and creating some longer songs overall. And in that vein, they decided to make the album a bit longer too. This is their longest one yet at 44 minutes. And they're not afraid to venture out into different areas with this extra time that they have. This means more dynamic songwriting, more focus on song building as well. And the main tool that they have to build these songs is that still filthy but slightly cleaner and more discernible guitar. And they are really creating some just groove heavy, tasty death metal riffs that really go a lot of different places. Some of them sound old school and more like knuckle dragging and skull smashing, while others bring this insatiable groove and I think are really intended to get a pit going and get some, crowd interaction during a live performance. At the same time, they use the guitar riff as the main, way of moving the song forward, creating a hook for the song, and they're employing some cool techniques like pinched harmonics and just different levels of distortion from the guitar as well. And just phenomenal riff after phenomenal riff. You could go to each song and find a cool riff within the first 30 seconds to a minute. Easy. And if not, then this is not the album for you. Even though I said the guitar is cleaner, I think the bass kind of steps up and provides that distortion and extra griminess that the guitar and production did on the previous albums. So there's plenty of time for the bass tone to shine through and for it to be a high point and just push the tracks forward. There are even a couple bass drops that make an appearance in here, which I am perfectly fine with. But most importantly, it just does a good job of bringing the recording down and making it sound a bit earthier and down-tuned. And I think that was kind of the secret to their success on previous albums. But now that the production is cleaned up, the bass is kind of taking on a more prominent role. And I think it's cool that it gets that chance on this album. One final point I want to make about the album overall. I think it does a good job of bridging the modern scene to a true, old school death metal worshipping scene. It fits in both with the Frozen Souls and Undeaths of the world, while at the same time not alienating people who just want to hear Autopsy again for, the 50th time. But then there's also something a little bit different from either of those bands and scenes. That special Finnish sauce, if you will. And now to get into the track listing. For me, the album starts to hit its strides on track 3, Menagerie of Grotesque Trophies. It opens with a creepy horror soundbite and then immediately goes into riff after riff. Like, it's got them all on this one song. The old school, the groovier mosh starting riffs, and then finally it just hits with the more interesting, like, pinched harmonic, just kind of off the wall kind of riff that leads the song forward. I just love the lunging groove that it settles in. And then potentially my favorite song on the album, track 5, Womb of Deathless Deterioration. It just has such a rotting, doomy kind of feel to it. And there's a lot of space for atmosphere and keys to kind of fill up the room and the production. And I think this is one of those songs that they were able to write because of the changes that they've made on this third album. Then from there it just goes strength to strength with some quicker songs like Crusading Necrotization and Hydraulic Slaughter, which on Hydraulic Slaughter there is a pulverizing riff that opens up the song I have to highlight. And then both tracks 9 and 10 on this album do a good job of expanding the songwriting a bit more, slowing it down, and basically bringing the album to an end on a high note. Track 9 from Inanimate Dormancy is a great balance between that Death Doom sound and something a bit more fast-paced. And the guitar lead that they choose to kind of be the hook in the middle of the song is top-notch. And then finally track 10, the title track, Bloom of the Abnormal Flesh, a travesty of human anatomy, is just a tour de force of everything that we've heard up to this point. And I think it's a great summation of all the different elements that have made this album kind of special and unique in 2025. So I will say there are some negatives for me. At 44 minutes, this album is a bit on the longer side for what I would usually take from an old school death metal revival album of this nature. I'm a firm believer in the get in and get out when it comes to this style. So for me, that 30 to 35 minute mark is the sweet spot. And towards the end, you do start to wane just a little bit. I mean, the songwriting is still great towards the end of the album, but maybe the listener's weary. And then finally, with the end of the album in mind, there's kind of a bit of a head scratcher here. So the title track, track 10, is the longest and most varied song on the album, and really feels like a closer. It just has that kind of grandiose, seal the deal kind of feel to it. And then when you get to the end of it, you kind of feel done. And then there's one more song, track 11, Slithering Decay, which is really a fine song, but it just feels thrown on there for no reason. And it doesn't fit the feel of the album. It's a 2-minute fast song, which is faster than anything else here on the album, and a bit punkier too, which is not necessarily a trait that Morbific has employed up to this point. So it kind of catches you off guard at the very end when you're basically succumbing to death at this point. And it's not a bad song, but it just feels like an afterthought as the final track. You know, I guess I'm being nitpicky, but this is a review, and I'm just sharing my thoughts. In closing, I do think Morbific does this style of death metal well and in a unique way in 2025. I would choose to have this on my Halloween playlist, in October of this year. I guarantee it. This will make the cut and stick the distance, and like a zombie, it won't fucking die, and I'm all here for it. So, I'm all on board with Morbific, and I think if you're a fan of any kind of death metal in 2025, you gotta check Bloom of Abnormal Flesh out. Alright, not done with your rotting corpse yet. Call to arms. And for tonight, we've got another putrid death metal slab from Headsplit, a Mephitic Corpse. Sickness attracts sickness. So this actually came out a couple months ago in early February. And if you're one of those fans who thought Morbific cleaned up their sound a little bit too much here, then I've got the album for you. Sickness Attracts Sickness is so down-tuned and kind of fucked up. You gotta wade through it. It's like wading through rotting distortion and, nasty vocals. It has a bit of a gore grind feel, but at its core, it's brutal death metal with a bit of an old school vibe. Very bass heavy, very distorted, sick samples, just sick all around. Man, if you're yearning for something filthy this year, just check out Mephitic Corpse. And I think that'll do it for this review. Thanks for watching. If you want to have another beer, tune in on Wednesday nights. I'm a part of the Heavy Metallurgy Album Club with Marty, Jim, and Kellen. And then, of course, stick around Heavy Metallurgy for all of the Friday night shows and other reviews that are happening. Also, don't hesitate to check out my channel, Metal and Beer Snob, and we'll do some more light drinking and metal talk. But until the next time, I appreciate you watching, and cheers.